to.
People like you don't belong here.
Oh my God, her voice sliced through the opulent air of the fundraising gala like a blade. The words, heavy and venomous, echoed under the crystal dome of the golden-lined hall, where the light of dozens of chandeliers illuminated every sneer, every mocking smile. The woman was Eleanor Vancroft, her silver hair sculpted into an iron crown, diamonds at her neck and ears dripping down like shards of eternal ice. On the other end of her fury lay a black woman in a simple yet elegant white gown, now sprawled across the cold marble floor. Laughter erupted like a cruel chorus. The crowd, draped in designer labels, all turned at once to drink in the spectacle. In their hands, glowing phones gleamed like sleek predators, eager to devour the painful moment and turn it into twisted entertainment. Eleanor hissed again, her shrill tone carrying like a sentence of judgment. "You are nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing at all." She tilted her chin towards security. "Get this disaster out of here before she breaks something that's actually worth having." At once, a man with a heavy gold watch cut in, his voice dripping contempt. People like her always cause trouble. Before security could even move, red Bordeaux wine bloomed across the woman's gown like a wound, exposed for all to see under hundreds of eyes. But when the woman slowly rose to her feet, the room shifted. The laughter sank, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Drops of wine tapped against the marble, soft yet icy, like the pulse of a storm gathering strength. She clutched her phone, but it was her eyes that froze the hall. Not rage, not sorrow, something colder, more certain. The look of a force of nature, preparing to reset the scales of injustice. Eleanor, blinded by pride, pressed on. She leaned in, her voice low but booming across the room. "You're just a pathetic stain on my floor. Forever worthless. Forever disposable." But the woman stood tall, straightening her ruined gown like a queen after coronation. Her gaze swept the crowd smirks, raised phones, indifferent faces. None of them knew the tidal wave about to hit, because none of them knew who she really was. Her name, Alani Washington. With a single touch of her finger across the phone screen, the world seemed to hold its breath. What she was about to do wouldn't just shock every person in that room. It would detonate the entire kingdom of illusions they had built. And, for you watching, this is where the line is drawn. If you believe every human being deserves dignity, hit subscribe right now and type the word dignity in the comments below. Let me know where you're watching from, because what comes next will forever redefine the meaning of consequences. Alani Washington, the name that would end the House of Vancroft. But to understand her fury, you need to know who she was. At 48, Alani wasn't some nameless woman who stumbled into wealth's temple. She was the ghost in the machine of American capitalism, the founder and full-power CEO of Apex Stratos, a global conglomerate valued at more than $62 billion. Her journey wasn't handed to her. It was forged over 25 years of battles, clawing her way up from a rundown apartment and sparse meals until she built an empire spanning technology, sustainable real estate, and ethical manufacturing. More than 250,000 employees around the world lived on the strength of her vision. But Alani never forgot her roots. She never forgot her grandmother's wrinkled hands, bent from working 3 jobs just to raise her granddaughter's scrubbing houses like the ones Eleanor Vancroft was born into. Every contract signed, every tower built, was a silent hymn of gratitude to that woman. And tonight, all that fire was about to come crashing down on the Vancrofts, a dynasty that looked untouchable but was already rotting at its core. The Vancroft name had once roared through Chicago, built on steel and railroads. But behind the glitter lay debt stacked like cards in a collapsing house. Harrison Vancroft, 65, heir to a mighty real estate empire, had spent 3 decades hollowing it out with disastrous investments, a secret gambling addiction, and a stubborn refusal to adapt. Even his wife and closest advisors didn't know the truth. Vancroft Enterprises was bankrupt. Eleanor Vancroft, 61, floated inside a bubble of vanity, believing social status was life's only oxygen. Her charity galas weren't born of compassion, but of power. They were her stage, her throne, where she cast blessings or punishments on those who played along. Their son Carter, 29, embodied pure waste, spoiled, reckless, failing at every company his father bankrolled, coasting on indulgence and cruelty. Their daughter Blair, 27, was more dangerous still, beauty veiling a frozen heart, delighting in humiliation. And yet, inside that blazing Chicago ballroom, none of them knew that their entire fate, past, present, and future, rested in the hands of the woman they had just shamed. Because this gala wasn't merely another night of display. It was meant to be their last stand, the celebration of a merger worth $25 billion with Apex Stratos, a deal they believed would rescue their collapsing empire, restore their dynasty, and secure their name for generations. But with Alani Washington standing before them, that door slammed shut, and the price would be everything they ever owned. Harrison Vancroft had spent nearly a year wrestling the deal into existence. Tonight, under the glitter of Chicago lights, he planned to announce it as a triumph, a miracle to save the family empire. Yet the woman they had spat on, dismissed as worthless, was none other than Alani Washington, the hidden CEO of Apex Stratos, the one person whose signature could seal the contract. And at that very moment, she was calmly wiping Bordeaux wine off her scratched hands on the floor of their ballroom. The bitterest irony? Harrison had never met her face to face. Every negotiation had passed through lawyers and intermediaries. In his mind, perhaps he imagined his counterpart as an aging white businessman in a stiff suit. He could never have conceived that the humiliation his family inflicted tonight was, in fact, the most expensive self-destruction in corporate history. But Alani's tragedy didn't begin when her body hit the marble floor. It started hours earlier, the moment she stepped out of her modest car to enter the very building she secretly owned. That December night, snow blanketed the streets of Chicago's Gold Coast, the enclave of penthouses and power. She arrived in understated grace, a sleeveless white gown custom, made by a designer with no public storefront, her hair swept in an elegant bun, small diamond studs, and a delicate bracelet at her wrist. Each piece was worth as much as a middle-class home, yet nothing about her felt showy, only the quiet confidence of a woman who belonged anywhere. For Alani, this night was meant to be a milestone, her first face-to-face meeting with the Vancroft family, a chance to raise a glass to an alliance she believed in. For weeks, she had looked forward to it as a hopeful turning point. But as soon as she approached the building's guarded entrance, reality struck like an open-handed slap. The valet in a thick sweater rushed up, not to open her door, but to point toward a dark alley around back. "Staff entrance is that way," he said flatly, without even meeting her eyes. Alani froze for a moment, hardly able to believe her ears. "Excuse me, I'm here for the Vancroft family's charity gala." Only then did the man bother to look up, his eyes sweeping over her from head to toe with a mix of suspicion and unease, as if the very idea of a black woman appearing at such a high society event was something his mind could not process. Reluctantly, he gave a stiff nod and let her step inside the main hall. Just beyond the velvet rope, beneath the golden glow spilling across the marble floor, a security guard named Greg was checking invitations. For the white guests who arrived ahead of Alani, he barely glanced at their cards before flashing a broad smile and opening the door with cheerful greetings. A woman in a long fur coat swept past, and Greg nearly bowed in respect. A boisterous businessman barking into his phone waved a flimsy slip of paper, and Greg himself held the door open for him. But when it came to Alani, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The smile slid from Greg's face, replaced by a stiff, probing expression. He took the thick invitation she handed him and turned it over and over as if it were a counterfeit bill. He scanned the guest list 3 times, his finger dragging slowly down the page, then declared loudly enough for those in line to hear, "I don't see any Washington on here." Alani kept her voice steady, calm, and assured. "Please check again. I know my name is on the guest list." Still, Greg put on a show of exaggerated scrutiny, squinting at every letter before shaking his head. "No, there's no Washington listed. Sorry." Right behind her, a white couple held out a flimsy piece of paper no thicker than standard printer stock. Greg barely looked at it before grinning from ear to ear. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Albright. Enjoy your evening." Alani's hands tightened into her palms. She pointed at her own heavy cardstock invitation. "This is an official invitation, the same as the others." But Greg only shrugged, his voice dripping with contempt. "These things are easy to fake these days. Print shops can run them off in minutes. We have to be careful." When she produced her valid Illinois driver's license, Greg only ramped up the performance. He held it beneath the light, scrutinizing every line of her face, rubbing his thumb across the surface as if he expected to peel away a plastic overlay. "Doesn't look like the picture," he announced, loud enough for everyone in earshot. The photo was a professional one, taken only a few months earlier, unmistakably Alani, but Greg seemed determined to find any excuse to keep her outside. We'll need to confirm with the organizers. Please wait out here. So began 90 long minutes of humiliation. Alani stood shivering in the Chicago wind, snowflakes clinging to her bare shoulders, where her thin white gown offered no protection. Through the tall glass doors, she could see Greg inside, laughing with the coat check attendant and chatting with fellow guards, never once picking up the phone to confirm anything. One guest after another drifted easily past him. Philanthropists she had quietly supported, business leaders she had once signed deals with. Not a single one faced interrogation, not a single one was delayed, but Alani became the target of every curious stare. A woman in a mink coat passed by, pulling her husband closer as if Alani carried a contagion. Another guest pointed openly and whispered, "Some people never know their place." Each passing moment pressed harder against Alani's restraint, her patience smoldering like a coal on the verge of flame. At last, Greg returned, handing back her papers with clear reluctance. She was finally allowed through after nearly 2 hours had already slipped away. She had missed the entire cocktail reception, the networking hour, and even the main dinner moments that should have been hers, as the event itself had been organized to celebrate a merger with the very company she had founded. Being admitted now felt less like a welcome and more like a grudging favor, as if she were an intruder. Her feet throbbed from standing in the cold marble entryway in high heels, her carefully styled hair now frayed and wind-tossed, the joy that had carried her into the evening extinguished, replaced by a block of ice lodged in her chest. She had no idea that the worst humiliation was only just beginning. The moment she entered the penthouse's marble atrium, a property secretly owned by one of her own real estate subsidiaries, Alani became the focal point of the room. From across the glittering space, Eleanor Vancroft spotted her silhouette and let out a cry sharp as broken glass. My God, how did housekeeping slip past security? The words shattered the air like a dropped champagne flute, silencing every conversation. Hundreds of eyes swung toward her, pinning her in place. Harrison Vancroft, mid-boast to a circle of investors, stopped cold. His booming voice carried, "This is a private event, not a job fair." Security. Carter, his drunken son, seized the chance to show off. Raising his glass, he slurred, "Did someone order cleaning services? I think the bathrooms could use some attention." His pack of friends erupted with laughter, as though he had delivered the joke of the night. Blair, the daughter, posed for her Instagram followers and chimed in with a brittle laugh. "Maybe she's looking for a broom. Somebody point her the way." The laughter spread, rippling outward until it filled the entire room. Phones flew up, not only to capture video but to live stream, broadcasting Alani's humiliation as entertainment. She drew breath to speak, steady words already on her tongue. "Actually, I'm here to," but Eleanor cut her off, stepping forward with a smile that sliced like a knife. "Listen carefully. You are nothing. This world is not yours, and never will be." Then, turning to the crowd, Eleanor declared even louder, "She is pitiful, wretched, unworthy of breathing the same air as us." Harrison nodded gravely, adding his own contempt. "Tonight's security has been disgraceful. Hard to believe people like this could get in at all." The crowd pressed closer, forming a half circle that hemmed her in. Every whispered comment was another blade. "Look how she pretends to be elegant. Shameless. Security should be ashamed." Each remark chipped away at her dignity, cornering her against the edge of the room. Parched and trembling, she stepped toward the bar, but the bartender's eyes flicked toward Eleanor for approval. With one dramatic shake of the head, Eleanor denied her even a drink. "Do not serve her. Servants do not deserve to drink from our glasses." Carter burst out laughing, staggering forward to jab his wineglass toward her face. "If you want to be useful, why don't you help the waitstaff clear tables? That's a job you'd be good at." Blair clapped like a delighted child. "Yes, finally, she's found her role." The crowd roared with applause, treating her degradation as if it were a comedy sketch. When Alani tried to sit, her exhausted legs nearly buckling, Eleanor swept in to block her path. "These seats are for guests, not for people like you." So she stood, trapped in that gilded cage, enduring a parade of cruelty. Guests passed by dropping barbs as though tossing coins. She really thinks she belongs here. Maybe social services should come collect her. Security has truly failed. Each insult peeled away another layer of her humanity. And still, Alani did not cry, did not scream, did not flee. She remained motionless, a silent mirror reflecting the rot of their souls, her composure unbroken. Then came the turning point. Slowly, deliberately, Alani drew her phone from her clutch. Her eyes gleamed, not with rage, but with cold certainty. The time for silence was over. It was time to act. She began reviewing the final details of the merger documents, the very papers that would determine the future of the Vancroft empire before the night was through. Papers worth billions, entrusted to the woman they had just scorned. And then Blair Vancroft emerged from the circle as though preparing for a grand finale. A glass of deep red Bordeaux in hand, she fixed Alani with eyes alight with theatrical malice. Her voice carried across the room, sweet and practiced like a performance. "Oh my, you must be so thirsty after all that. Let me get you some wine." For the briefest instant, Alani faltered. After hours of relentless humiliation, could this be a sliver of humanity? A small gesture suggesting that perhaps one member of this family still possessed a trace of kindness? She reached for the glass of wine. But at that very moment, Blair subtly swept her foot out, tripping Alani in a move so practiced it looked rehearsed. Alani's body slammed hard against the cold marble floor as the glass tilted, spilling crimson across her white gown like a wound that could never be erased. Blair instantly slipped into her performance, hand covering her mouth, eyes wide with feigned shock. "Oh my goodness, how clumsy of you. I was only trying to help. I'm so terribly sorry." Eleanor swooped in at once, her voice ringing like a shrill alarm bell. "See? I told you. This is exactly what happens when people like you forget your place." Carter burst into roaring laughter, filming the entire scene on his phone. "God, this is going to go viral for sure. Somebody call housekeeping." "Oh wait, she is the housekeeping." The crowd erupted, laughter ricocheting through the glittering room like violent waves pounding against a solitary wall. Phones rose high, screens flashing, capturing every second. Instagram, Twitter clips were already flying across the internet. For them, this was the climax. The absolute humiliation of a woman turned into cheap entertainment. Harrison waved his hand, urging security forward. "Get this disaster out of here before she ruins something that's actually worth money." This was the very beginning of the story we witnessed. Alani Washington lay sprawled on the marble floor of her own penthouse, her gown drenched in red, the jeers of the wealthy crashing down like hammers. They had no idea that the woman they mocked as nothing held everything, wealth beyond the entire guest list combined, ownership of the very building they stood in, stakes in companies that made their fortunes possible. Soon, all of it would be revealed, and the cost would be their entire legacy. What about you? If it were you lying there, would you walk away quietly to protect your dignity, or would you stay and deliver justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Alani began to rise, slowly, not the posture of a victim, but the bearing of a queen reclaiming her throne. Every drop of spilled wine hitting the floor sounded like punctuation, ending an old chapter, opening a new one. Still, the crowd kept laughing, recording, indulging in their cruel game. Convinced this was the finale, the servant escorted out. They didn't realize the play had only just begun. A phone rang, its sharp tones slicing through the noise. Alani glanced at the screen and answered calmly. "Apex Stratos. This is Alani Washington." On the other end, David Chen, her chief counsel, spoke clearly, his voice loud enough that a few nearby guests could hear. "Madam Washington, the merger with Vancroft is finalized. All that's left is your electronic signature for the announcement tonight. Shall I proceed?" While Carter laughed at his video, Blair posed dramatically beside the red stain, and Eleanor embellished the story with theatrical tones. Alani's voice cut like steel. "Cancel everything, David. Every contract." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Did you say cancel all of it?" Alani's gaze swept the room, thick with ridicule. The entire $2.5 billion merger. Every real estate deal, every tech license, every supply chain agreement. End it all. David hesitated, but Alani ended it with a whisper sharp as a blade. "Burn it, David. Send me confirmation now." A few guests nearby finally went silent. The words, billion and merger, struck like a gong. Faces shifted, arrogance giving way to unease. Yet Eleanor, drunk on performance, raised her glass mockingly. Look at her, probably calling her parole officer. The crowd laughed again, but the sound was twisted now, brittle, uncertain. Harrison, in the middle of a conversation with an investor, caught fragments. $1 billion, merger. His body froze. Color drained from his face, his heart pounded erratically. He shoved through the crowd, trembling as he reached Alani. "Excuse me, did you just say your name is what?" Alani ended the call with a decisive tap. She turned, facing the man who had called her a walking disaster only minutes before. Her voice was calm, professional, and lethal as the blade of a guillotine. Alani Washington, founder and CEO of Apex Stratos. From her clutch, she drew out a black metal business card, her name and title engraved in platinum. A single card worth more than a family's entire week of living expenses. She handed it to Harrison with the gravity of a head of state. And in that moment, she signed the death warrant of the Vancroft dynasty. Harrison clutched the cold card, his hands trembling as though he held a death sentence. He read the name. He read the title. And when the truth detonated like a bomb in his mind, the wine glass in his other hand slipped, shattering into 100 shards across the marble. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot, signaling the end of their world. Every laugh fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the host of the evening, now pale as a corpse, lips quivering, unable to speak. Eleanor rushed to him, her painted face still smug, still oblivious. "Harrison, what is it? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" "She's just a maid, isn't she?" But Harrison couldn't form words. He only stared at the platinum engraving, his desperate eyes scanning the letters again and again, as if willing them to change. Eleanor snatched the card from his hands, and in that instant, her arrogance shattered into terror. Color drained from her face, her lips trembled, and only a few broken words slipped out. "No, this can't be." At last, Harrison croaked a hoarse whisper, "She's Washington. Our deal. Apex Stratos." The room dropped into a deadly silence. Those words hung in the air like an executioner's axe. Shock rippled through the crowd, faces stiffening, eyes wide, mouths agape. The laughter died, the phones went still. The glittering gala of Chicago's elite turned into the funeral of a dynasty. Alani stood in the center of their stairs, her eyes burning with a cold authority. "That's right," she declared, her voice carrying with unshakable power. "The $2.5 billion merger, the only lifeline for your debt-ridden empire, was mine. And you just lost it." The silence that followed was so heavy you could hear the snow falling outside. Everyone understood. They hadn't just disrespected a stranger. They had participated in the financial suicide of the Vancroft family. Eleanor's champagne glass slipped, shattering beside her husband's. Blair froze mid-pose, her face locked in shock. Carter slowly lowered his phone, his mocking video now a pathetic obituary for the entire family. Harrison gasped, mouth opening and closing like a fish dying on land. And, in a piercing moment of clarity, they all realized the woman they had humiliated, trampled, and scorned was the only one holding their future in her hands. Alani didn't need to shout. Her silence was enough to freeze the air. She lifted her phone again, placing it on speaker. Each word rang out like nails hammered into the Vancroft's coffin. "Patricia, this is Alani. Activate the termination order on all contracts with Vancroft, effective immediately." The cool, measured voice of her attorney echoed back, casual as if discussing the weather. "Understood, Madam Washington." Alani's tone cut like ice. "That includes every real estate deal, every tech partnership, and every so-called philanthropic pledge. I want every tie severed permanently." Alani turned back, facing the frozen ballroom. "Since all of you are so curious about me tonight, allow me to introduce myself properly. I am worth $62 billion. The number landed like a direct blow. A few guests gasped. Some even stepped back, as if the very figure carried a terrifying gravitational pull. Those who had been gleefully recording the spectacle now scrambled to delete their videos, realizing they had just documented evidence of their own social demise. Alani did not stop. "I own this building. I own the towers, where many of you house your companies. I own the banks holding the mortgages on your homes, the investment funds carrying your children's futures. And tonight, all of you chose to humiliate the very foundation of your financial lives." Harrison collapsed, his voice shaking as he begged, "Mrs. Begged. Washington, we didn't know. If we had known who you were." Alani cut him off with a look so cold it froze the air. "You knew I was a human being. That should have been enough." Each word fell like a verdict. Everyone in that room understood. They did not need to know her net worth to treat her with basic respect. They did not need to know her titles to refrain from cruelty. They had chosen malice, and now they would pay the price. Moments later, the doors opened. It was not new guests, but an entire team of Apex Stratos attorneys, more than a dozen, in sharp suits with briefcases in hand, entering with the precision of a strike force. Leading them was a black woman with silver-streaked hair and razor-sharp eyes. Her voice rang out as she read the official notice. By order of the Apex Stratos Board, the following agreements are terminated, effective immediately. The $2.5 billion merger, all commercial leases in Chicago, the $600 million annual technology partnerships, global supply chain contracts, and all funding for the Vancroft Foundation. With every clause, another piece of Harrison's soul seemed to tear away. He trembled, his breathing broken, as though witnessing his own autopsy in real time. But the list was not finished. In addition, the lawyer continued, Apex Stratos revokes all loans and lines of credit extended to Vancroft and its subsidiaries, with immediate repayment required. All assets are frozen pending litigation. That was the final cut. Harrison staggered, nearly collapsing, as the ballroom erupted in shock. Panic spread like wildfire. One society matron, who had laughed the loudest when Alani stumbled, now turned pale, realizing her husband's logistics company depended entirely on an Apex Stratos contract. She slipped toward the exit, hoping to vanish before anyone noticed. But no one could escape. This collapse was not confined to paperwork. It was unfolding here, in the very room where they had cheered her humiliation. And now, they were the ones dangling beneath the guillotine of truth. Peterson, the hedge fund manager responsible for a large portion of the Apex pension fund, frantically texted his partners, trying to manage the fallout from being present at this catastrophe. But the ship had already sunk. The rats were scrambling to abandon it. Major donors who had been flattering the Vancrofts just hours earlier suddenly forgot their names. Business partners who had been discussing future deals melted into the shadows. The Gold Coast penthouse began to empty with astonishing speed as guest after guest fled the storm they had once applauded. Yet the damage extended far beyond those walls. The videos capturing the humiliation spread across social media, screen captured and shared with captions of outrage. On Twitter, hashtags exploded. Vancroft racism, billion-dollar bigotry, the cost of cruelty. Blair, who had delighted in pushing Alani to the floor, now sobbed in a corner, her expensive makeup streaming down in black streaks. "Daddy, what's happening? Why is everyone leaving? What does this mean for us?" Harrison looked at his daughter, the child he had spoiled all his life, with hollow eyes. "We are finished, sweetheart. This deal wasn't just a contract. It was our last lifeline. Without it, we lose everything, the company, the house, the cars, all of it." But Blair could not grasp it. In her world, consequences only happen to other people. "We are Vancroft," she screamed, convinced the name itself was an invincible shield. "We are rich. This can't be happening." But it was, second by second, because of choices she herself had made. Carter, who had proudly filmed Alani's fall, now scrambled to delete the clip, but it was far too late. His mocking face was already circulating worldwide, a global symbol of blind arrogance. Eleanor, after her moment of shock, shrieked like a madwoman, lunging toward Alani. "You can't do this. You can't destroy an entire family over one misunderstanding. One night, does it erase a century of achievement? This is unfair punishment." Alani met her eyes, voice steady as ice, counting off on her fingers. "You called me worthless. You said I was unworthy of breathing the same air. You denied me a glass of water. You took pleasure in watching me be humiliated. And all because of my skin color." She paused, her tone dropping low. "You didn't just insult me, Eleanor. You revealed exactly who you are when you believed the person in front of you had no power. And now you know who I am. This is the consequence." In that moment, Carter, still drunk, still foolish, lurched forward, his hand shaking as he pointed at her. "This is reverse discrimination. You're only doing this because we're white. We'll sue you and take all your money." The room went dead silent again. Everyone realized he had just set himself aflame in his own stupidity. Alani's gaze softened, almost pitying. "No, Carter, this is not discrimination. This is the bill, and tonight you pay it." She pulled out her phone one last time, her voice echoing through the speaker. "Patricia, final directive. Redirect the entire $2.5 billion Vancroft merger into the Grandma Rose Fund. dedicated to supporting Black entrepreneurs, women founders, and minority communities right here in Chicago. Carter's face turned chalk white, realizing the scale of the disaster. Alani continued, "Draft the press release. Nationwide distribution tomorrow morning. Tell the world that Apex Stratos stands against discrimination, that sometimes doing what is right means walking away from those who are wrong." Harrison collapsed to his knees, tears streaming as he pleaded, "Mrs. Basin, Washington, please, I beg you. My children, my wife, they'll have nothing left. 5 generations, our legacy, gone forever." They didn't understand what they were doing. Alani looked down, her voice glacial. "Oh, they understood, Harrison. They understood they could demean another human being for sport. They understood my dignity wasn't worth a cent. And now they will have what they gave me tonight, nothing." Eleanor sank into a chair, whispering, "We're ruined, utterly ruined." The remaining guests raised their phones, openly recording the downfall of a dynasty. The Vancroft name was already becoming synonymous with one of the costliest mistakes in modern history. Alani adjusted her wine-stained gown and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back for the final judgment. "No, Eleanor, you are not destroyed. You simply no longer stand on the backs of others to enjoy the view. Consider this your final bill." The room fell into absolute silence. No one moved. No one spoke. They only watched as Alani Washington walked out of their lives, taking their past, present, and future with her. The consequences arrived swiftly and mercilessly. Within 24 hours, every major newspaper headline blared, "Billionaire cancels $2 billion deal after racial humiliation." The price of cruelty was broadcast worldwide. 1 year later, the Vancroft name existed only as a ghost. The Gold Coast penthouse had been sold off to a coalition of minority-owned businesses backed by the Grandma Rose Fund. Their legendary art collection was broken apart and donated to museums. The jewelry Eleanor once wore while ridiculing Alani was sold to fund scholarships. Harrison, at 66, was bankrupt, working as a low-level property manager in the suburbs, commuting over 2 hours by train each day. Eleanor, once queen of society, now folded sweaters in a clothing store, forcing smiles at people she once scorned. Blair, at 28, worked behind the counter of a small cafe, her cracked hands serving lattes as the humiliating clip resurfaced whenever anyone searched her name. Carter, at 30, lived in a dingy apartment, working night shifts as a janitor for a tech incubator, ironically funded by the Grandma Rose Foundation. The family that once thought they owned Chicago was scattered and invisible. They had learned the most expensive lesson of all: cruelty is a luxury no one can afford. When you value people by skin color instead of character, you don't just lose your soul, you lose everything. The woman they had once called nothing had shown them what nothing truly looked like. That snowy night in Chicago became a case study, retold in boardrooms and taught in business schools. Character is currency, and respect is the only investment that never fails. Forget that, and you invite ruin. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share so others can understand. The sweetest revenge is not only success, but building a fairer world from the ashes of prejudice. See you in the next story.